Good morning, everyone. This is Elayne from Anabellas. Welcome to crossstitchschool.com, lesson number 1. Today is our first lesson with 5 more lessons to follow each week over the next 5 weeks. And I am very, very happy that you're here. Just to give you a little bit about me and my method of teaching, I have been cross-stitching since I was 12 years old. I was taught how to stitch by my most beautiful Aunt Millie, who was a very, very important person in my life. And she taught me how to stitch in hand. And I'll talk about that in a little bit, but that is the method that I'm going to teach you. Now, there are many other methods that you can try once you're comfortable with stitching, but my method is called stitching in hand, and that is the method I'm going to be teaching you over the next 5 weeks. Now, you're going to adapt your stitching style based on what's comfortable with you, and it's probably going to evolve over time. It's not just going to happen because you attend 5 or 6 weeks worth of cross-stitch school. As you become more comfortable holding your fabric or using a hoop or a Q-snap and moving your needle in and out of the fabric, you're going to come up with a style that really is most comfortable for you. And my philosophy when it comes to cross stitch or really anything new that you aspire to try is that it's okay to be perfectly imperfect. And I've put the hashtag above. I'd love for you to use it throughout your cross stitch journey because I want you to promise me that as you start to learn how to stitch, that you take your time, you go slow, and you don't give up. You're going to have, bumpy lines, and you're going to have stitches that maybe you forgot to complete the entire X or complete the cross. You might completely miss a stitch. And I just want you to know that it's okay to be perfectly imperfect. I'm not perfect. Most of my cross stitch pieces aren't perfect, and that is perfectly fine. So just enjoy the journey. Be gentle with yourself, be kind to yourself. I think one of the greatest things about learning how to stitch through video education is that you can pause the video at any point, rewind it, go back, and look at things over and over again until you're comfortable with whatever is being taught in the moment. The floss and fabric for this class, for those of you who have purchased the floss and fabric packs, those have gone out today or yesterday, and we did sell out. So if you went to anabellas.net and you purchased the floss and fabric pack and it is on back order, we do expect more to come in next week, and we will get those right out to you. This is our chart. This is called Home. And you can download this directly. I'll put the link below. You can go ahead and download this free pattern. And this is what I'm going to be reviewing and teaching you how to complete as we go through the next 5 weeks. So if you don't have it, go ahead and download it so that you can get started. This morning, pardon me, this morning you received an email, most likely, with crossstitchschool.com lesson 1 notes. And those are just some highlights that I want you to keep so that you can refer back to them if you ever need to. But there'll just be some short notes on this particular lesson that we're reviewing today. Let me get a sip of water real quick. Now, one of the things I want to make sure that you do, which is very important, is if you are attending cross-stitch school, you need to subscribe to this channel. The link is above, and you need to ring that notification bell, and that is very important. That is so that you're notified whenever I release a new video over the next 5 weeks. So please be sure to do that. Pause right now, go ahead up, click that subscribe button, click that notification bell, and then we can get started. I also want you to go to Facebook. If you are a member of Facebook and you have an account, go to Facebook. The link is below so that you can join our group, Cross Stitch School. So we do have a Facebook group, and that's where all of you should go to meet each other, give a shout out, let everyone know where you're from. Don't be shy, share your progress, ask questions. I'll be popping in and out quite a bit. I'll probably be doing some Facebook Lives in the group over the next 5 or 6 weeks. So that is definitely something that you would like to do. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, to get started is I'm going to go through just a real quick review of what I call cross-stitch supplies. And the reason I'm doing that is it can get a little overwhelming. So, because there's a million different things that you can buy. And what I want to show you is what I keep in my cross-stitch project bag and what I keep, you know, on my little cross-stitch table beside me at my fingertips as I stitch. So the first thing I'm going to show you, of course, is fabric. So your project that you downloaded is called Home, and this is stitched on 14 count Aida. And what that means is that there are 14 squares, little squares, per inch, and you can clearly see the squares here. Each square begins and ends perfectly. And as you learn to stitch, you're going to learn how to come up through one hole, down through another, and then complete your X. And when you do that, that's one square. And when you do 10 of those across, that is 14 squares that will be in 1 inch. Okay, I said that wrong. 14 squares per square inch. All right. The other thing that you're going to be using, obviously, is embroidery floss. Now, we are using DMC embroidery floss. These are the colors. These colors are going to be donated on your cross-stitch chart so that you will be able to know what color skein, these are called skeins, what skein and what number on the skein you need to use as you begin to do your pattern, complete your pattern. And I'm going to go through all of that with you, so no worries. The next thing I want to show you are cross-stitch needles. And this is kind of important. Needles are come in different sizes, and there is a reason for that. I did cover this on Tuesday Tidbits, so this might be a repeat for some of you. We are going to be using a size 24 needle. This is DMC, and then I happen to use Boheen needles. These needles are the best needle for stitching on 14 count fabric. The eye of the needle is large enough that you probably won't need to use a needle threader, but today I am going to show you how to thread a needle using a needle threader, because that is how I stitch. And as I said, I'm going to show you exactly how I stitch, you know, from beginning to end. This chart is available as a download, and I'll go ahead and include the link below. You can print this out and just keep it. Actually, you don't do that. I'm going to just include it in your class notes today, so you're going to receive it with your class notes. And it's just going to be something that you can put aside so that if you do graduate up to a 16 or 18 count Aida, or you move on to stitching on linen, you'll know exactly what needle would work best. And the correct needle is important because it stops your thread from fraying, and it also helps preserve the fabric. If you're using a needle that's too big or a needle that is too small, it will definitely have an effect on your fabric and on your floss. The other thing that I use that I want to point out to you, this is called a needle minder. And the reason I use this is because if you are a stitcher and you don't use a needle minder, it's likely that you have either sat on one or stepped on one, and it is not pretty. So it's a very, very strong magnet, and all you do with the needle minder is you take the piece that you're working on, put one in the back, and there the needle minder sits right there on top, and it will hold your needles so that you won't lose them. It makes it very, very simple as you're stitching to just have that needle minder right there. Now, if you find that it's a little bit too heavy when stitching in hand, I sometimes don't even keep the needle minder on my fabric. I just keep it right next to me, and when I'm done, I go ahead and just place it on the needle minder on my table, or, you know, off to the side, simply so I don't lose my needles. But many folks will just go ahead and leave that needle attached as they stitch. Oh, look, that frayed. See what happens? Well, that's being perfectly imperfect. So let me just pause there. Perfectly imperfect. You see? This is what happens. This piece of floss, when I went and put it in the hole here, I did not go underneath my thread in the back and it has pulled out. So I can fix that. But I am perfectly imperfect, even as your instructor. So there you go, right? Okay, so that's the needle nanny. These are needle threaders. These are very inexpensive. If you've ever gotten Happy Mail from me, you've probably received this. I'm going to show you how to use this handy dandy little needle threader to thread your needle, and it's very, very simple to do. Embroidery scissors are highly, highly recommended. You could use Fiskars, I guess, but embroidery scissors are very nice to have. You want a scissor that is very sharp and can cut your floss very quickly with a very clean cut. And of course, like anything else in life, you know, there's the Volkswagen brand and then there's the Mercedes brand. So, you know, you can just pick up a pair of inexpensive embroidery scissors. You don't need to spend a lot. I've had these scissors just this past year after 40 years of stitching, and I bought myself 2 pairs of fancy embroidery scissors. But, you know, you can go ahead and certainly get, I think we sell these for $3.99. They're not very expensive, but you definitely want to have a pair or 2 in your project bag just so that you have it when you're snipping your floss. All right, next is a project bag. Now, project bags, this is a project bag that was gifted to me, and you can see it's very pretty. It's usually, you know, large enough to fit your everything that you're stitching with. So your chart will go in here, you'll put your floss in here, your needles, whatever you need so that when you go to stitch, you can grab it. You want to make sure that when you're not stitching, your project is safe and secured. I also buy my project bags on Amazon, so you don't have to spend a lot of money. We do have an Amazon shop. I'll go ahead and include that link. You can certainly go to the Amazon shop and you'll be able to see all of the items that I'm mentioning here today, so that if there's something you want to add to your cart, you can do that. And I do have many project bags that I bought on Amazon because they're very affordable. Next thing is a floss ring. They come in 2 sizes, or they come in 3 sizes, but here's 2 small sizes. These are 1.5-inch rings, and these are 2-inch rings. And what these are for is some fancy floss, which we're going to cover in another episode. The floss comes on a cardboard card, and there's a hole at the top that you can use, like a punched hole, that you can attach to this ring, and it just has all your floss together. But today what I'm going to show you is how to put your floss on a floss key. These are floss keys. You can store your skeins of floss any way that you'd like. You can just stick them in your project bag, but I tend to use floss keys. So I'm going to show you today how to take your floss off the skein, put it on a floss key, add a sticker with the correct number to the key, and then go ahead and put it on your ring to keep your floss all together and easy to access and safe for your project. So we're going to review that as well. And then I want to share with you a couple of other ways of stitching, as I mentioned. I stitch in hand, but hoops are very popular. I just grabbed 2 different hoops. These are just inexpensive wooden hoops, and they fit over your project. I'm going to show you the smaller one. If you were to use a hoop, you would put the hoop behind your project, and then you would unscrew, attach it here, and then as you can see, you would stitch. It holds your fabric very taut, and you can stitch, you know, one area at a time easily. Now, that doesn't mean that, you know, you have to use a hoop. You could certainly use a Q-snap as well. Now, Q-snaps are kind of like PVC. They're plastic frames, and you just snap them over your fabric and in a square rather than in a hoop. unlike hoops, they advertise that you don't get any wrinkles. I find that they're a little heavy, so I don't like holding anything heavy in my hand when I'm stitching, but that's just my personal choice. Q-snaps come in various sizes. They come in 6 by 6, 8 by 8, and then for larger pieces, 11 by 11. So, and I think that you can even buy expanders. So go ahead and check out Q-snaps once you are further along in your cross-stitch journey, so that you can try a different method of stitching. Maybe you'll like to stitch in a hoop or on a Q-snap. I also use these Clover Clips. Now, if you're a quilter or not, you may have seen or you may have these in your stash at home. Clover Clips are just kind of like paper clips, and what these help to do is if you're stitching in hand and you find that you have too much fabric on one side, you can fold your fabric very gently, and you can take a Clover Clip and attach it, and it just makes it easier. It gets that fabric out of your way. Now, I don't use Clover Clips on small pieces like this because I just simply do what I showed you. I just will fold my fabric as I'm stitching, you know, and I can do that with a small piece. But for larger pieces, these are great. So you might want to go ahead and just have these available in the event, you know, you begin to stitch on larger pieces. Blue painter's tape, I do not have here to show you, but the link will be included and it'll also be in your class notes. Blue painter's tape is widely available, and you just cut a piece the length of your each of your edges, and you cover it. You cover these edges right here, because this is what happens when you don't protect your fabric. The edges begin to fray, and that could eat into your stitching area or into the area you need when the project is done to finish your project off, whether that's put it in a frame or whether that is add some rickrack or some fabric around your piece to finish it. You know, you're going to want to have extra space on all sides, so you want to protect these edges. When I stitch in hand, I go pretty quick, and with a small piece, I just don't do enough damage, you know, to worry about it. But I want you to protect your edges and use that blue painter's tape. It's so simple that it would be silly for me to waste time to show you how to put painter's tape on this. You know, it's pretty self-explanatory. But if you have a question, just send me an email. All right, so we have that. So let's get started with a few things. The first thing I want to do is remind you that I'm going to show you how I stitch. So the first thing that I do when I start my cross stitch projects is I get my floss in order. So this is a floss key, okay? And it has a little opening here, like a slot, and it has 2 slots on each side and the hole that you will attach to the ring. Right here is where you can, and you don't have to do this, you can use a Sharpie, but you want to make sure that you know what's on this key once you put your floss on here. So your floss has a number. DMC puts numbers on all their floss. The number 603 is for this color, okay? So what is in this little DMC sticker kit are all the DMC numbers. So you would search for number 603, and then you just peel it off, and you want to put it right here so that you know what color is on here. Then the way that you take your floss off the skein to put it on here is as follows. When you are working with DMC floss, you always want to make sure that you find the end at the bottom where the number is. That makes it very easy to pull your floss out. If you try to pull it from this end, the end that doesn't have the number, you're going to have a problem. It's going to be very difficult, and it could get very tangled. So DMC has created it in a way that you can just gently pull from here. So what I do is I just start, see how easy that pulls out? I start like this. I just take my floss key, I hold the piece down, and I begin to wrap it. And you're just winding this around your floss key. So we're just gonna wrap this around completely. I'm gonna tuck that end in like that, and away we go. So this is gonna take, I don't know, a couple seconds. And it's okay if the little papers fall off the skein. You know, I just keep pulling as I go, wrapping it along. And it takes just a minute or so. Now, for this project, I think we have 5 skeins of floss, so it won't take you more than 5 minutes to put all of the skeins for this particular project on your floss key. Okay, so now when you're done, you're gonna have this little tail sticking out. So what you wanna do is you wanna just tuck it. If it doesn't reach to the second one, you just wanna tuck it under here on the first one. And look at that. Now your floss is safe and secure. And then you just wanna take one of your rings out of your little bag. And these rings just open up like a keychain. You've all had those. And this will go right on here. And there you go. See, that's it. Now you have all your floss on a ring, easily accessible, and you just throw it in your project bag and it's with you wherever you want to go. Okay, so whether you're in the car driving somewhere and you want to take your stitchy project along with you, when you get to where you're going and you have some time to stitch, it's very easy to pull everything out and get started. Now, I'm going to show you next how I thread a needle. So, because we're working with the floss. So I'm going to go ahead and show you on this DMC size 24. So you're just going to open up your needles, and DMC kind of makes it reusable, kind of. It does. So you just pull that open gently, and there's some plastic right here where the needles stick. I'm just going to pull out a needle, okay? And then while I'm waiting to show you my floss, I'm going to place the needle on my needle nanny, and it's keeping it nice and safe. All right. So, can't do anything, ladies and gentlemen, unless you have your needle threaded. When you are ready to begin, you want to have a length of floss about the length of your finger to your elbow. So I just take the floss out of the little corner thing here, and I'm going to unwind it, I don't know, about the length of my arm, okay? And then what I'm going to do is just snip it. And I'm going to put that aside. Now, I have a long thread of floss. DMC floss is cotton embroidery floss. And there are 6 pieces or 6 strands of floss in each length that you cut. So as you can see, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, what we want is we want to gently pull just one of the strands away from these. The way that I do that is I pick one, I hold it, I very gently hold this in my hand, and I'm gently pulling. Just pulling the floss right off of those other 5. Now, I have this left over, the piece that I'm not using. I'm going to set that aside, and I'm left with one long strand of floss. The next thing I want you to do is I want you to join your 2 ends together. And again, this is how I do it, okay? So you're going to join your 2 ends together. So you have this end and join them together. Then I take my needle threader, which has an big eye right here. It's a little metal eye. And what I'm going to do is take my needle off the needle nanny, and I'm going to take this and I'm going to insert it through the eye of the needle, just like that, okay? Then I'm going to take my 2 strands, I'm going to stick them through the eye of the needle. I'm going to hold it right here, and I'm going to take my needle and I'm just going to pull it back through, and as you can see, it catches the floss and I pull it through, and there you go. So my needle is threaded. Now, the needle has the 2 strands here, as you can see. Let me separate these real quick. I'm getting a cramp in my hand. Why can't that separate? There we go. Because I licked it, that's why. Okay, so you can see both ends are there. At the bottom is a hoop. And when I show you how to begin to stitch your very first stitch, this hoop is going to be important because this is how I begin all of my cross stitch projects. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, let me put that back on here. Now see, I can use my needle nanny. It keeps this together and safe. I don't have to worry about losing my needle. Believe me, Elayne has lost a lot of needles. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you how to read a pattern. So I'm going to set this aside, and then I'm going to show you how to begin with your very first stitch on your fabric. Okay, so when we talk about cross-stitch patterns, there are a few things that you need to keep in mind. This is the pattern, also known as a cross-stitch chart. Most designers will go ahead and have darker lines on the pattern. And if you look at your chart, you're going to see that you have a dark line running the length. Every 10 squares, you'll see a dark line. That means that you can count over 10 little boxes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay? That means that if I wanted to cross stitch everything within this little box, it's 10 across and 10 down. Okay? And I'm going to tell you why that matters as we learn more about cross stitching. But when you're getting ready to begin your cross stitch project, what you're looking for, as far as how I teach people to stitch, is you're looking for your center. Most designers will have an arrow at the top and an arrow at the side. If you bring those two together, come all the way over and all the way down, that dot right there, that brown dot, that brown square, which has the symbol DMC 801, that is where we're going to begin. Okay, so DMC 801 is where we're going to begin. I threaded the needle with pink because I wanted you to see the color. I'm going to rethread a needle with DMC 801 so that I can show you how to create your first stitch on your fabric. So I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. I just wanted to thread my needle with some brown floss because this is the color that we're going to use when placing our first stitch. We identified that the center of the chart is right here at the top of the eave of the doorway. So what I want you to do is I want you to find the center of your fabric. And the way that you do that is you take your fabric and you fold it in half, and then you fold it in half again. And right here is the point. I just give it a little squeeze. And when I open it up, I know this is the center of my fabric. So what I do is I fold this part of the fabric under just a little bit. It just makes it easier for me to hold. And then you're going to take your needle. You know where the center is. And you want to come up in a bottom left corner of the square that you identified as the center. You're going to come up in the bottom left. You're going to pull your floss through, but you don't want to come all the way through. You want to leave this open in the back because you're going to stick your needle through that hoop, and that's how you're going to anchor your floss. So you come up in the bottom left of the square. Now you're going to find, here's your square right here. See those four corners? So you're going to go from the bottom left to the top right. So you're going to stick your needle in the top right, and you're going to come down. Now, as you come down, you don't want to pull too tight. You're going to flip your fabric over. There's your hoop. Stick your needle underneath the hoop, and then gently pull your needle until your floss is anchored. You see? And you're going to turn it back over, and that is called a half of a stitch. So now what you need to do is you need to complete the X. So that's not too hard, right? So you're going to come to your bottom right of the square. There's your bottom right. I'm gonna come up, pull. Now this time you're gonna pull till you feel just the slightest bit of tension, okay? And then you're gonna take your needle and you're gonna put it in the top left. And as you pull through, you have now completed your first square. And my needle, which happens often, my floss fell out of my needle. So I'm just gonna quickly re-thread my needle, which I can do without a needle threader because I am trying to save some time. And this is a very raw video because I want you to see what happens in real life as a stitcher, even if you've been stitching for, 20 years, 40 years, or 1 week. These are common things that will come up as you're stitching. So I'm too tired to not use a needle threader. It's very early here. I think it's like 7 in the morning. So I want to just be gentle with myself and not worry about it. Okay, so as I said, you're gonna come back now up and finish your X. So your bottom left, and you're gonna put your needle in your top right. And there you go. That is your first X. So you have now completed your first X in your cross stitch. Now I'm going to show you how I stitch. I stitch with 1 X at a time. You can also stitch with half stitches all the way across a row and then come all the way back and complete the row. But let me show you how I do it first, and then I'll also show you how to do it with a row all the way across. Okay, so we've completed our first X. Now what I do to make sure I can keep track of what I've done is I go to my pattern and I find what the stitches that I just made and I mark it off on my chart. Now you can do this using a highlighter, you can do this using a computer program. I just do it using a pencil. And this is my working copy. I always make a copy of my original chart so that I can mark it up and not ruin the pattern should I decide to stitch it again at a later date or gift it to a friend. So here is the eve of the house. This is where I placed my first stitch. So I'm gonna just color in where I placed my first stitch. Now, on this row, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There are 10 crosses, 10 stitches that have to go on this row, okay? So what you're gonna do now is you're going to, from your center, you're gonna count and you're gonna place 1, 2, 3, 4 more stitches next to the one that you just did. So that's the one you just did. Now if you look, you have 1, 2, 3, 4 more on that row. Okay, so you're gonna pick your cross stitch back up. You're gonna go 4 to the, you're gonna put in 4 more stitches to the left of the one you just placed. Now this is important. When you come up to make your next square, you wanna go directly into the hole of the last, you wanna go directly into the hole of the bottom of your last stitch. So that, let me show you what I mean. So here is the stitch. These are the 4 corners. I'm gonna come up here, which would be the bottom left of my new square, come up in the bottom left, and then I'm gonna come across to the top right. So once again, I came up in the bottom left, and I put my needle back through the top right. Now to complete my X, I'm gonna come up in the bottom right, and come back down right into the hole of the top left. So that's 2. And how many do I have to do? I have to do 4. So that's 1. And then I'm going to go into my bottom left, top right, 2, bottom right, top left. That's, now I've completed my second stitch and I need 4. So I'm going to come back up, bottom left, down, top right, up, bottom right, down, top left. That's 3. Last one. up, bottom left, down, top right, up, bottom right, down, top left. And I'm going to let my needle dangle to unravel any chance that this is going to tangle. You want to do that every so often. You want to let your needle kind of just fall so that your floss doesn't get tangled. Okay, so now if I count each of the squares I've made, I should have 5. So the way that I do it, I just take my needle and I just count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I have now completed 5 on that particular row. So I'm going to pick up my pattern. That was my first stitch that I placed, and I just did 4 more. So I did 1, 2, 3, 4. So 4, and the one I did is 5. So I'm now going to take my pencil, and I'm just going to gently mark off that I did those. Now, as you can tell, you still have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more stitches that you have to make to the left of your very first stitch that you put on that row. So what you want to do now is you're going to go to the left of your first stitch, and you're going to do what we just did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more times. Now, you don't have to take your needle out. You don't have to, rethread your needle. What we're going to do is called traveling. You look at the back of your work. You're here, right? This is where you are, but it's okay to now start stitching way over here because you're only traveling, what we call traveling with your needle, a few spaces. Okay, so now what we know is that this stitch right here, hold on, let me get this, let me bend this over. Okay, this is our first stitch that we did, remember, and we did 4 more. Now what we're going to do is we're going to come up next to that first stitch, and we're going to do the same thing we just did with the other 4. We're going to come up in the bottom left, down in the top right, up in the bottom right, down in the top left. That's 1, and I need to do 4, so I need to do 3 more. That's 1, bottom left, top right, bottom right, top left. That's 2. I need to do 2 more. Whoops, drop my needle. Bottom left, if I can find the hole. Bottom left, top right, bottom right, top left, and then again, bottom left, top right, bottom right, top left. Okay, now what happens is sometimes, like I just had happen to me, I lose count of how many stitches I put in. So what you can always do is you can count how many X's you have. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I have 9. And on this row that I'm stitching, I need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I need to put in 1 more stitch. So I have 10 across that row. So I'm going to do 1 more, bottom left, and top right, bottom right. And yes, sometimes it's hard to find the hole. And then down into top left. Now I have 10 stitches, which I have placed across this row. So that's 10 stitches across this row. I'm going to take my pencil and I'm going to cross off what I just did. So now this row is complete. Now I have 2 choices. I can either come down a row and stitch this, or I can go up a row and stitch these. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come down a row and stitch all these all the way across, okay? So how you do that is you take your needle and you look where you left off, flip it over. You left off right here. So I kind of just take the point of my needle and come up, and now I know where I left off. So what I have to do is, if you look at your chart, you have to come down to this row here and over one, because this is where this particular row has one extra stitch on each side of the row we just did. So you're going to come straight down, and you're going to place your needle right here to make your first X. Bottom left, top right, bottom right, top left. Now, remember what I showed you. You have, I just came down, I did this stitch right here, but I have to do one right next to it because, as you can see, this row extends one on each side. So let me come, I did this one, so let me mark that off. And now I need to add a stitch to the left of the one I just did. So I'm going to come next to it. I'm going to go to the bottom left of the square, go into my top right, bottom left, and top right. Okay, now I've got 2 stitches complete on the row. I'm going to come back to my paper and I'm going to cross off the one I just did. Now I have to complete the row. So I have to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 more stitches. Okay, and visually, when I do my 10 stitches, I know that I'm going to finish 1 stitch past the row I just did. That's very obvious to see visually, but I have to count. Counting is very, very important in cross stitch. One of my best rules is count twice, stitch once. So always count your X's, your X's before you actually finish your row, so that you know that you've got the correct number. So here we go again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, so I have to do 10 more. So I'm going to pick my cross stitch up. Remember, what we're doing is called traveling, because I ended right here. This is where I ended on this one. I can go ahead and move over, and I'm going to do 10 stitches beginning from the stitch. I'm going to start right next to the second stitch. So I'm going to come up in the bottom left, and I'm going to do 10. So that's 1, let my needle drop, 2, 3, 4. I hope I don't run out of floss. But if I do, that's okay. I'll show you how you change your floss in the middle of a row. 4. 5. Okay, and I'm going to have to change my floss. All right, and the reason for that is on the back, it got tangled. So I usually take my floss, my needle when that happens, and I try to untangle it by just gently using my needle to pull through. So I can rethread my needle if I'd like, or I can change it. Because it's so short right now, I have such a short amount of floss left on my needle, I'm going to go ahead and rethread my needle, but I'm going to show you how to change your floss, or, you know, rethread your needle. Okay, so I need to finish this row, the row that I'm doing of 10, but I don't have enough floss on my needle to go all the way across. So what you're going to do is, on the back, you're going to flip your project over. Here's your needle. Here's the stitches you just did. To neatly finish your work, whenever you change a color, you take your needle and you gently take your needle and slide it under the stitches that you've just completed. You don't want to go through the holes, you just want to go through the stitches. So you're kind of just lifting your stitch very gently, and you can do it under, like I do it under 4 or 5 stitches. I just run my needle underneath, turn it over, just make sure needle hasn't come through. I just tap it. Here, let me show you that again. I don't think the camera was positioned right. You take your needle, you just want to slide it under some of the stitches you just did. I tap it, make sure the needle didn't come through. And then I just take it and very gently pull. And then I take my scissors and I just want to snip. My needle minder stuck. Just take my scissors and I just want to snip as close to the fabric as I can without cutting the fabric. So now you can see the back, the needle, the thread is gently hidden, and I can turn it over, and there you go. So now what I need to do is rethread my needle with more floss so I can complete this row. So let me do that real quick. Let me find my brown floss. Okay, and remember, I'm going to take my floss once again, and that's stuck. I'm going to pull just one strand out of the floss, and I'm going to find my 2 ends, bring them together, take my needle minder, take my needle threader rather, put this in here, drop, whoops, bring those 2 ends together, drop my floss through the hole, and pull through. There you go, it's threaded. Okay, then I'm going to pick my work back up, come right back here. I'm going to put my needle through the hole on the left, bottom left, top right. I'm going to hold my floss gently, not to make it too tight. Take my needle, come through the loop in the back in order to anchor it. I'm going to come back up on the bottom right and down in the top left. So I'm just going to keep going along until I get to the end of this row, because as I showed you visually, I know that my work is going to be 1 stitch past the row above it. So let me just do that real quick. Now what I want you to notice as I'm stitching is I want you to notice my left hand. And what you will notice is that my left hand really doesn't move at all. It holds my fabric very still, very consistent, but this hand stays still. All the work that I'm doing is being done with my right hand, okay? So when stitching in hand, this is what stitching in hand is. You're just holding your fabric gently in your hand, but firmly, and you are using your right hand, if you're right-handed, to complete all of your cross stitches. Now, whenever I do 5 or 6 stitches, like I said, I kind of let my needle drop so that my floss untangles, and then I just keep going. Okay, so keep going. And I know that the light might be a little funny, and that's because I brought in an OT light to shine on here just so that you could get, you know, as much close-up visually as I could make for you without it getting blurry. All right, now I have to go 1 past the row above it, and this will be my 10th stitch that I just counted that I needed to add to this row. So bottom left, top right, bottom right, top left. Okay, so there you go. We just completed our 2nd row of the eave above the door. So what I'm going to do is go to my chart. Here is the 2nd row we just completed. I'm going to take my pencil and I'm just going to mark it off. Now, in order to complete this section, I have to come up and I need to complete this row right here. and I count how many stitches there are. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's 8 stitches. Visually, I can tell that it's 1 stitch in from the first row that I stitched, or what you would now call your second row. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I need to put in 8 stitches. So I'm going to take my needle. I'm going to see where I left off, which is here. I'm going to come up, and I know that I have to count over 1 square because my stitch begins right here, one above the this row here. It's over 1. See, here's this, so it's over 1. So I'm going to place my needle there, and I'm going to make 8 stitches. Okay, so I count over 1. And I'm going to place my needle bottom left, top right. Okay. Now, bottom right, top left. That's 1, and I need to do 8. So that's 1. 2. See what's happening here? That's how you know you need to let your needle drop. My needle drop, let it unravel. Bottom left, bottom right, top left. This is 3. Bottom right, top left. This will be number 4. Bottom right, bottom left. Oh God, top right. And you're just making X's. See? So that's why it's called cross stitch. You're coming up, making what we call a half stitch. So that's half of your X. And you're coming up again, and you're just finishing it. And letting your needle drop, unfloss, unravel. So this is 6. 7. Oh. I can't get it in the little hole. And last on this row that I counted, remember I had to do 8. So now I have 8 stitches across my row. So I'm going to go back to my chart. I just completed this row right here. So I'm going to take my pencil and I'm going to cross it off. Now I have to go above a row above it. I have to go in 1 from here to here, in 1. And I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And now I need to do 6. Take my needle. I left off here. I'm going to go in 1. And I'm going to count 6. So there's 1. 2. 3. 4. And you'll come up with your, and my floss fell out again. So that's what happens. You'll come up with your own way of counting as you stitch. You might say in your head, you know, like I am, the number of the stitch that you're on. You know, as you are completing the X or as you're starting the X, but whatever works for you. However you can keep track of the number of stitches that you've placed. It's going to end up being like a mantra in your head until you do what I do sometimes, and that's, oh my God, what number was I on? And then you have to stop what you're doing and just go to the piece itself and count the stitches that you've placed in your fabric. Okay, so now I've done 3 and I have to do 6, so I'm going to keep going. So I'm going to come up again where I left off. So that is in this hole right here. And remember, you're putting it in the hole of the stitch that you've just completed. Bottom left, top right, bottom right, top left. That's 6. I have 2 more to go, and I'm going to be out of floss by that time. There we go. This is 5. And 1 more. My last stitch on this row is number 6. And that's 6 stitches. So I've just completed 6 stitches. I've made 6 X's across the row. I'm not going to be out of floss again. Now, some people will keep stitching until it's down to the nubs. I don't do that. It drives me crazy, and I find that the floss does not lay flat across the square, and I'm going to show you why that's important in a later video. But right now, I'm going to go ahead and finish this off so I can rethread my needle. I'm going to take my needle. I'm going to very gently slide it under a few stitches. You're kind of just lifting your needle up and down under the stitches, as you can see there. I'm going to tap it through, take it, and very gently pull. And I'm going to take my scissors, and I'm going to snip it close to the fabric. And there you go. So you now have completed 1, 2, 3, 4 rows on your pattern. And you've completed those 4 rows above the door, which is the eave of the doorway. So I'm going to take my needle again, and I'm going to go back to the floss that I have sitting next to me. I'm going to pull another strand. I just want 1. I find 1, and I just gently pull it through. Take the floss that I'm not going to be using. I usually just fold it and place it aside. Find my 2 ends. And I can feel a knot in this right here. So when I can feel that the floss isn't right, I like to get a clean snip. Okay. Then I'll thread my needle if it'll go through the first time. And when it goes through the first time, I'm so happy. That's the little things in life. Okay, so now what we need to do, we need to finish the last 2 rows, which are going to be easy. I always love the easy rows. We have to do this row here, 1, 2, 3, 4, and the row above it, 1, 2. I can see I have to come in 1 square on each side. So I'm just going to take my fabric, see where I left off. Oh, I didn't leave off. I rethreaded it. So I'm just going to I'm going to count over 1 square, and I'm going to come up right here. So I'm 1 square in from the row below. As you can see, I have to start right here. Okay, so I'm right here. So I'm going to go ahead and pull my needle down through my hoop. Now I'm going to come up, floss fell out. I told you it was going to be real world. There's no point in making it not real world, because if you're a new cross stitcher, this is what you're going to face. So although it may not be pretty, it may not be professional, it is what it is. This is what life is like as a stitcher. Okay, so I fixed that, rethreaded my needle. Now I have to come back and finish my square. So I'm going to come up, bottom right, in, top left. I have to do 3 more. If I can find the hole. There it is. Okay, that's going to be 2. And down. Now I'm starting number 3. And down. And my last stitch on this row is my 4th stitch. We counted I needed 4 stitches on this row. Up 1. And then down 1 more stitch. And that row's done. Get in the habit of marking your chart after every row. Don't assume that just because you only have 2 stitches on the row above this one that you shouldn't mark your chart. Take it from me, mark every row, even if there's just 1 stitch that you're entering. It will make your life much easier. So now I need to complete the last of this this particular section that we're working on. I have to put 2 more stitches in. They're in one square from the row below it. So I'm going to come up, I'm going to count over 1. I'm going to see where I finished. I finished here. So I'm going to come up here, count it over 1 square. And that's going to be 1. I need to do 1 more. Whoops. I didn't put that on the right hole. And it is important that as you're stitching that you are making sure that your needle is going directly into the hole of the square that you just completed. And last, bottom right, top left. And now it is complete. So there you go. You have just completed your first section of cross stitch on this pattern. You've completed the eave above the door. And now what we're going to be able to do is we can come down and stitch the rest here before we move into the pink. So we're going to stitch this part. You know, I'm going to have you work on that. So what you're going to do as homework is you're going to try to complete this section here. I want you to come down. Okay, and then I just want you to do the stairs. So what you're going to do is you're going to start here. You're going to come over from the last row, come over 1, and this is where you're going to stitch, right here. Okay, let me show you with my needle. The row that you're going to stitch is here. So you're going to do 1X here, and you're going to come all the way down you're going to make as many X's or as many cross stitches as you count. You're going to count here, and we see that we are going to need to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Let me count it again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So what you're going to do is you're going to do 10 straight down and then 10 straight down. Okay? You can go ahead and go across after that if you feel comfortable doing it. If not, you can wait. But go ahead and get these 10 down on each side, and then if you'd like, go ahead and finish the stairs. So that is our first lesson on how to begin cross stitch. If you are confused, please pause the video, go back, rewind it, and watch it over and over again. Practice makes perfect. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay for everything to feel very uncomfortable in your hand. Don't give up. Just keep trying. This is a small piece of fabric. If you can use what I sent you, if you bought the kit, as your scrap and just play with it, and then buy another piece of 14 count Aida that you're going to then keep in your stash and use that to create the actual pattern once you're comfortable with holding and creating your cross stitch. So that's something I would recommend is just take a piece of Aida and maybe just practice practice making row after row, stitch after stitch, until you like the way it looks and the way that it feels. So next week, we will talk more about stitching and how to cross stitch a row, doing it in a different method, which is just making half stitches all the way across an entire row and then coming back and crossing it completely as you go in the other direction. So I'm going to show you that next week. But this week, I just want you to get into the habit of making those X's and becoming very comfortable with doing that. So I hope you enjoyed this first lesson. I certainly enjoyed spending a little bit of time with you. Practice, practice, practice. Next week we'll be together again, and I'll cover, like I said, different ways of stitching a row, using a half a stitch and then coming back and finishing it. And then I might, if we have time, go over some different types of fabric and floss that we use commonly in the cross stitch world. So I want to thank you again. I hope that you will tune in on Tuesday for Tuesday Tidbits. On Friday for our regular scheduled floss tube, and then again next Sunday will be lesson 2. Until then, be happy, be well, and most of all, be kind. See you soon. Bye-bye.